Hey guys, it's Ken Scott, a senior U.S. immigration law and intelligence analyst with www.usentry-waiver-services.com to get you guys cleared to enter the USA. Today is June 12th, 2025, and I kind of want to get right into it. Made a couple of notes here. So, one of our readers in our Facebook group, he's replying to a post that we made. Well, actually, I didn't make it, but another reader in the group, he wanted to know when and if anyone else recently had received any waiver approvals. So I made a post, and this other gentleman made a post. This gentleman said, "I've read quite a few border agents are denying even with a waiver," meaning, I guess, people.
If you are obsessive compulsive, press 1 repeatedly. If you are codependent, ask someone to press 2 for you. If you are
Sorry. So he posted, "I've read quite a few border agents are denying entry even with a waiver," meaning, like I said, people. "More so now than a year ago. Is that true? I've let my 5-year waiver lapse and hesitant on renewing it if I get turned away." So this post is kind of like a tribute to him or to his question. And what I had said was, I cannot speak for what you have read, but I'm going to say that's not quite accurate. It's true that a U.S. entry waiver does not guarantee entry to the U.S. for a foreign national. However, they have to have a valid reason to revoke a waiver. And I said, this is a great topic for a YouTube video. Well, we did that. So based upon that, today's title is going to be U.S. entry waiver does not guarantee entry to the U.S. U.S. immigration explained. Okay, so to address his situation, you guys need to understand something. Let me give you a bit of a foundation. Let's just say that Joe Smith needs a waiver for bank robbery because he robbed the Bank of Montreal Abbey. Okay, well, convicted of robbing the Bank of Montreal Abbey. Okay, so he needs a waiver for that conviction. So Joe Smith goes to the border with his valid waiver. This is his waiver in my hand. I'm the officer. I said, "Okay, Mr. Smith, no problem." So he sent the secondary for whatever reason. So I'm looking at the waiver and look at the system and I see that he has a waiver for bank robbery. Okay, this waiver temporarily waives the inadmissibility. You guys can see, if I see it, temporarily waives the inadmissibility for the bank robbery. So I said, "Okay, Mr. Smith, I see you've got a waiver for bank robbery." And I said, "Is there anything else that maybe you've done in the past or whatever?" And then he says, "Oh, well, I sold some powder when I was 20. I said, "Oh, well, what happened?" "Oh, well, I was in a car with a bunch of guys. We were driving down the street. We got stopped by the Surrey RCMP, back then Surrey RCMP." And the fact that because they found a backpack in the back seat with baggies of, I'll just say white powder or powder tablets, if you know what I mean. Everyone in the car got convicted because they all agreed. Everyone in the car basically agreed that you're running a dial dope operation, which whatever, that's fine. Past is the past. Well, by him admitting that to me as an officer, I can now revoke his waiver and say, "Sir, your waiver only covered the uh, bank robbery. It didn't cover the dial dope operation." Now he was never. Now let's say he was never convicted of the dial dope operation. They let it go, or he had a conditional discharge and it accidentally had dropped off his file. Well, not accidentally, but it dropped off his file and it's gone, which is fine. But by him admitting to it, he just put a spotlight to it. So now his waiver is revoked. So now he has to get a waiver for the bank robbery and now the dial-a-dope operation. And the dial-a-dope operation, that's a whole another kettle of fish that we have to address. So this gentleman, when he made his statement about he's hesitant to redo his waiver, well, first of all, he's got to make sure his waiver is done correctly. He's got to make sure his waiver addresses the appropriate areas of inadmissibility. And he needs to also, well, not him, I'll say per se, but then these other people also need to understand when you deal with these U.S. border officers, you need to make sure that you I'm gonna say give the right presentation, the correct / appropriate presentation. I won't go into what that is on this video, but it has to be the appropriate presentation. So you guys got to know you're dealing with U.S. federal officers, and these guys are trained essentially to, I'll say, find deception. Granted, a lot of them aren't really as great as they could be, but they're essentially trained to find deception. So you got to be careful when you have these waivers, and you got to be careful of these port of entries. Careful in the sense of, I don't know how to even explain it. For example, if you're going down there, if you're a longshoreman, you're going down there to border, you're going to Vegas for a weekend, and they look in your phone and see transactions for uh, selling $10 bags or whatever, you're going to get denied entry. And if you have a waiver, even for drug trafficking, but if you have a waiver for that, they're going to say, well, sir, you in your phone, there's information indicating that you were involved with drug trafficking recently. And he says, well, yeah, I was. Okay. His waiver is now revoked. Even if he had a waiver for trafficking, it's revoked. Because the trafficking only covered the trafficking at that period. Let's say the period was 1995. It covered the 1995 period. It didn't cover the 2025 period. You guys didn't know that. And again, these discount waiver companies, you guys go to these cheap places and cheap out. They do this stuff incorrectly, and you guys get these waivers denied or not prepared properly. So even if you get an approval and you say or do the wrong thing that's going to hurt you, that waiver is going to get revoked. So they got to have a valid reason, bottom line, to revoke a valid waiver. If you give them a reason, they're going to revoke it. If they don't have a valid reason and they can't find anything else, they're not going to revoke your waiver, so you have nothing to fear. So we had another situation where a gentleman has a serious offense, and his steps are you have to be careful how I word this stuff because a lot of people here in Surrey know each other in Surrey, East Vancouver. They all have relatives all around, Surrey, Vancouver, Brampton, or whatever. So I have to be careful I don't say anything that's going to indicate who the person is because these guys all know each other or have a relative who knows one another. So that's why sometimes I'm hesitant to say certain things or change the wording around with certain things. So I'm just going to say this person had an issue with drug trafficking. Let's just say this person was indicating the fee that we're going to charge him to redo his waiver. Um, he wasn't jumping for joy over it until I had to remind him. I said, well, bro, you got a very serious record here. It's not like you stole a car in 19, now you're 40. You got one of the things that's more serious at CBP. And he agreed, so he's going to redo it. And guys, we don't necessarily need all the money up front anyway. We're fine with a deposit down. And then what we do is when everything's ready, it's all finalized, then we collect the balance. And for the most part, that's been working out pretty well. So don't be afraid to file a waiver. You guys really got to be careful of who you're going to hire for these waiver applications. Now, today a gentleman called me from Toronto, and not to go into detail about his actual file, but I'm going to say he had an offense for, I'm going to say drug trafficking. It wasn't that, but let's say drug trafficking. He was initially charged with it, but it got dropped down to assault. I'll just say that because it got dropped down to assault. That's great on one hand, but he crossed the border while the charge was pending, and now CBP knows about the prior charge. They know the fact that it got dropped down. So it took a while to explain to him the ins and outs. And I said, because you crossed the border that time, and they saw you had a charge pending for drug trafficking. It was something else, guys, but with drug trafficking, they still have those notes. So they know you had a trafficking charge pending. The fact that you got to drop down to assault, that's fine and dandy. But this gentleman tried to re-enter after this thing was dropped to a simple assault, which simple assault generally does not require a waiver. The officer at the Niagara Falls border, which that's one of the worst borders to deal with anyway in Canada, but Niagara Falls, Rainbow Bridge in particular, told him, or argued with him, said, I told you need a waiver and I get out of here. And I told him I'm not surprised to hear that because I've had trouble with that border myself. I've had to call out there, speak to managers regarding how they're treating waiver applicants. And that's why the guys that come to us from Ontario, Normally it's Brampton, sometimes the city of Toronto. They fly out here. We take them down to the border and stretch SUV to follow the waiver. But anyway, so the point is, in his case, I was telling the gentleman, I said, what we got to do is prepare this packet to show why you don't need a waiver. And there's a way to do that, and I'm not going to go into detail regarding that because the discount waiver companies would love to learn how to do that for this kind of stuff. And I'm not having it. But basically, we have to show in the packet why the person does not need a waiver. And then the service makes the final determination. And based upon what they feel, what they see, and their analyses, based upon all those factors, then that's when they decide whether to give the lifetime clearance. And I'm not talking about these dollar store places that get a lifetime clearance for something like, uh, let's say, a bar fight or DUI. Because a simple bar fight, Section 266 assault or DUI, doesn't require a waiver anyway. So if you guys get scammed by one of these discount waiver companies in Ontario, especially the city of Toronto, and I guess and even in Brampton, there's a couple out there that are scammers in the city of Brampton. You guys get scammed by that, and guys say, "Oh, I got your lifetime clearance." That's straight bullshit anyway, because the fact that the bar fight or the DUI does not even require a waiver in the beginning. You guys got scammed. So if this happened to any of you guys, you need to go out to that place and make it known to them you are upset and that you got scammed and you want your money. You want your money back. That's straight bullshit. There are certain crimes that do not require a waiver. I'm not talking about the simple stuff like DUI or like the bar fights, the assault section 266. I'm talking about other stuff, like higher up in the food chain, where technically does not require a waiver, or there's ways to get people out of needing a waiver based upon the DHS regulations. We use the DHS regs, manuals, and pamphlets. I have all that stuff. I do. And me being a former federal officer and former law enforcement officer that was previously posted in Washington State, this is how we get you guys cleared to enter the USA, based upon using their own regs, manuals, pamphlets, everything. I've got all that, and I always get the current ones that come out because I can always pick up the phone and give a shout to a few associates who work for the U.S. government and say, "What's the latest?" And they tell me, I say, "Okay." And based upon that, done. I mean, for us, this stuff's a no-brainer, right? So hopefully that gentleman from Toronto, he understands. Now, one of the things I'm gonna cut it off after this. One of the things I did tell him, we require the person to make an in-person visit the first time to start this process, especially like situations like this. And some people out there in Ontario are hesitant to fly out here, and main thing they cite is the cost. Well, guys, if you want this stuff done right, and you got the complex stuff or the tricky stuff, it's going to cost you money. It's going to cost you money. It is what it is. If you guys cheap out and you got one of these complex files or tricky ones and you get screwed or ripped off, that's your fault. Because I'm trying to warn you guys now. This stuff costs money, and we need to have you make an in-person visit for the first time. Now, for us, we don't have a Toronto location yet, or I should say anymore. There's one coming up in Brampton soon. We have one in Brantford now. But the thing is, what happened with us at the Toronto office when I had it there, too many Torontonians were upset. Well, not, I won't even say upset. Too many Torontonians would balk at the fact that the fees we charge for this stuff. And they said, oh, I can go next door and get it for $300. I said, well, go right ahead then. And sometimes the Torontonians, when they call out here, sometimes they still do the same thing, some of them. But then they come back after they got screwed or ripped off or scammed. And then if they got scammed and I charge them our fee, so they got to pay our fee on top of what they've already paid. So they actually end up paying more anyway. Or if they got denied, then we have to charge them even more because if they would have stayed with us the first time, we could have gotten this beaten and maybe even a lifetime clearance. We're doing it with a guy now. He went to a discount waiver company out here and they did his file incorrectly in 2014. Got the guy a waiver. He didn't even need a waiver. So now what we did, at least yesterday, we showed him why he didn't need a waiver on paper, put in all the relevant supplements and etc. And certain pages from the manual, I'll say. So once that's filed, which should be really today, once that's filed and is adjudicated by CBP, he should technically get a letter in the mail that states that he does not need a waiver. Technically. based upon the DHS regulations and etc. and some other stuff that I won't go into. Anyway, guys, I've talked enough. Ken Scott, Senior, U.S. Immigration Law Intelligence Analyst with www.usentryWaiverServices.com. And it's 888-908-3841 or 604-562-8140. And guys, again, be careful out there. And like I've always said, don't believe what the mainstream media is telling you about this border crossing stuff. It is not that bad crossing over to the USA for the most part. Yeah, if you've gotten in trouble in the past or if you have something in your phone that could come back to bite you, yeah, you've got problems. You definitely have a problem. But even a valid waiver, as long as everything else is good to go and come talk to us before you even make that trip, you're fine. The smarter clients out here do that before they go down. And 99 times out of 100, they have no issues. And even the ones who've gotten challenges tossed at them by CBP, they still rise above the occasion. I mean, to me, it's a no-brainer. It's common sense. So you guys got to start using some common sense. That's another thing, too. And I'm out. Have a great day.